Well, hey folks, it's your old pal, King Waspinator. Welcome back to Total Party Skills. Be sure to hit like and subscribe. Now, when I was first coming up with my original notes for Orc+Bone, when I was designing the setting, my original intention was I was going to have Wargs as a playable race, turn them into more like an evolved humanoid wolf kind of thing. But then as I started to, actually, hammer it down and wet it to the white box rule set, they didn't really have wargs written up that way, and I didn't necessarily want to like intrude something entirely from scratch to such a fashion, so I kind of switched over to Gnolls. Now, I've always been a little fond of Gnolls. It's different that you have like a hyena-based, human-animal hybrid species running around. I do find the current 5th edition depiction of Gnolls basically just makes them into a race of subdemons, practically, with their whole strange life cycle of, hyenas consuming dead bodies and then a gnoll grows out of them and all that kind of stuff. Seems like if you have a gnoll problem, the key is to not really worry so much about attacking the gnolls, but to make sure you wipe out all the hyenas in your region, and that'll do a lot to curb a gnoll outbreak. But I mean, you can almost like run a 5th edition, Gnoll story adventure, almost like some sort of zombie plague kind of thing. I'm trying to get away from that. I'm going back to them just being, like creatures, flesh and blood, born from copulation, all that kind of stuff. In many ways, the reputation that orcs have from other races in history is really more what should be the Gnolls. Reputation. They are the ones that are a lot more primitive. They can be trained easily, but their natural society is basically just to be simple nomadic, hunters, less so much gatherers. They don't manufacture very much of their own goods. They have functional hands, but they're still, big and furry, and they have claws, so there's some kind of minor fine dexterity kind of stuff. I have it written up that they're not really good at, firing, bows with strings and all that kind of stuff. They're more prone, if they're going to be using a ranged weapon, to chuck a spear or use a crossbow and things like that, because it's a bit easier on their hands. But otherwise, it doesn't affect their dexterity attribute to any degree. It's because they're still fast and they can still dodge and make leaps over rivers and all that kind of stuff. The reason why they're a companion race for the orcs is kind of like just over the centuries. When orcs were kind of like a roaming kind of mercenary race being used by various, fringe tyrants and wizards to try to pull off various plots of conquest and world-ending doom. The orcs would often be paired up with gnolls. Gnolls would kind of work under them as scouts and shock troops, whereas the orcs were, the more sophisticated tacticians and field soldiers and such like that. And so when the orcs all come down into the fallen empire of man at the beginning of the Orc+Bone setting, they have gnolls with them. And as they've gone on their little orcish crusades to liberate halfling kind from the vampires and other evil things that reside in the ruins of the old human cities, the gnolls have come with them. And they're starting to get a little bit more sophisticated. When left to their own devices, they still tend to fall back on simple little tribal clan, family pack kind of units that will typically be matriarchal. And running with the idea that these are hyena creatures. They're kind of more of like a long-lost Ice Age hyena as opposed to like modern equatorial dwelling hyena species we have in our own modern world. So bigger, shaggier, hardier, more prone to living out on an open plain and preferring colder climates as opposed to being like a forest dwelling kind of species or anything like that. But amongst orcs, they'll show discipline. They'll show loyalty to whoever's the most dominant force. If whoever their commanding officer is taken out in a battle, they are prone to scattering, unless an even higher ranking, stronger commanding officer comes through and keeps them all in line. They make surprisingly good rangers, and the way I have rangers written up in this, because they have on top of just the ranger abilities, they also have natural tracking abilities because their enhanced sense of smell and hearing and all that kind of stuff. like in some ways, probably more than anything else, they're actually closest to being the elf of this setting. If you're going for kind of like a wild elf kind of vibe. Wargs I do keep around, and they do need to be like considered, you know, like in your adventure and world presentation, because in many ways they've replaced the horse. You know, since humanity's gone, and halflings are the size they are, really only half elves really care for horses anymore, and so. Like, there's a lot of wild horses in the northern steppe plains and whatnot, but you don't really see a whole huge amount of horses being domesticated and raised anymore. In place of that are the wargs, which are large subsentient wolves that, you know, orcs had been breeding for centuries up in the north. And now you see both wargs that are integrated into battle units and wargs that have been able to just go off and go wild and kind of take over those niches as the new wilderness has risen. You know, since there's no native wolves, wargs have just kind of just naturally taken their place. You see them partner up with wild gnolls. You see them being used as mounts and you know, trained war animals by the orcs. And also they'll hang out with werewolves. Werewolves are basically descendants of werewolves. You know, as described, you know, when the humans disappeared, the humans that had some sort of magical curse on them or other kind of magical effect or magical ancestry did not disappear, and instead a lot of them mutated. Well, in the case of lycanthropes, it just kind of threw them into being permanently stuck in that man-wolf hybrid form. And there's enough of them because, you know, like the late human empire was pretty corrupt, and like a lot of the noble families and such had, you know, like intentionally, you know, corrupted themselves for power and all that kind of stuff, blah, blah, blah. So there was enough werewolves that they were able to kind of establish a minor amount of a stable breeding population. And so the current werewolves are the descendants of those werewolves who survived the snap. And they're kind of like almost like reverse werewolves in that they stay in like the to borrow the term from Werewolf the Apocalypse, they stay in their Krenos form, where they're large and hulking and vaguely humanoid and big gnarled clawed hands and all that, except on the full moon. Then they can revert back to their human form. Also, when werewolves are alone with each other, they can regain their human form and communicate properly. But as soon as they realize that anybody else is like looking at them or has come across their little meeting, they'll suddenly all instantly revert back into, you know, the werewolf form and, you know, go nuts and go on a killing spree and all that kind of stuff. They're not really written up in a way that like player characters could be one. Also, though, the lycanthropy curse is no longer spread by bite. It's now like purely just like a bloodline thing amongst them. So, like, player characters at least don't have to worry about that. You don't have to worry about becoming a Gnoll werewolf, or however the hell that would work. But anyway, as I said, though, like, wargs do hang out with the werewolves, too. They're kind of like, you know, a fairly common animal species. Like I said, subsentient. They have a grasp of human language, but they can't themselves talk. But they're better at like communicating their wants and needs as like a, you know, a standard modern dog is, for sure, and much more like clearly actually really understanding what you're saying, not just having slowly learned to associate certain mouth noises with certain tasks and stuff like that. They actually can understand the intent behind the words, and also like, you know, read people's vocal inflections and stuff like that. There's a chance like, you know, a warg would understand that you're lying to it in a way that a dog would never catch on to, kind of a thing. And you know, if you're like having player characters buy a warg riding animal or something, you know, like, it's because of the fact that I did attach this to the white box rules, there are some things like equipment costs and costs for riding animals that I don't list in here. Use your own judgment. I would generally think that, you know, because of, you know, the extra enhanced abilities in terms of their ability to guide themselves and make their own decisions, and the increased capacity to follow more intricate orders and self-monitor themselves, that wargs would probably cost at least 2 to 3 times as much as, like, you know, a fully trained, fully grown warhorse, if not more. You want it to be like not entirely unreasonable. There's a good amount of them, so it's not like buying a Pegasus or a Griffin where there's a limited commodity kind of a thing. but yeah, you know, like you'll want to, you know, make a point that, you know, of depicting like most, you know, riding forces, most cavalries and mounted, you know, strike forces that you find in this setting are wolf riders as opposed to horse riders. And so I guess that's about it for this video on Gnolls and Wargs in Orc+Bone. Leave comments below. Hit like and subscribe. I'll probably cover half-elves and the she next time I do another one of these videos. And so until then, stay waspinated.